This is my part two again. Sorry for Spencer. So I guess it kind of works out because this is a different series of questions anyway. But is there a text that you've read that's not considered literature, but you feel it should be, or vice versa? Is there something you studied as literature that doesn't really meet the standard? This, I think, is a really fantastic question. Right now, I think, as far as our culture or society goes, New York Times bestseller list is kind of the indication that something is successful in the literary world. And so I think by looking at that, you can see that there's a lot of things that are considered literature today that don't necessarily meet the standard of classics. I mean, you think classics, you're thinking, Great Gatsby, you're thinking Grapes of Wrath, To Kill a Mockingbird. Does 50 Shades of Grey fit in there? No, it's terrible. Does Twilight fit in there? No, it's awful. Does Snooki fit in there? No. I mean, I can be honest, I've never read any of her book, but based on what I know, no, she doesn't fit. And so I think there's a lot that doesn't fit there, but this kind of ties into your third question, which is how do you feel, or do you feel the widespread of education, particularly being able to read, has changed or influenced the value of literature? And I think the New York Times bestseller list is a fantastic example of how it has. I don't think there are a lot of things that would be successful if more people weren't educated. And I'm not talking educated in a really in-depth sense. I'm talking about that they have the ability to read. So now you have this population of people who maybe aren't educated, but they can read, which is maybe why some of these books have got on the bestseller. That goes into culture, that goes into what's, who's reading now versus who was reading years ago. So yeah, I definitely think there's a connection there, and an important one to look at. And then, are there any recently published texts that I would consider to be literature? I will say, in the last year, I read a fantastic novel that was new, and it was called The Jinni and the Golem, or The Golem and the Jinni. I think it did make the New York Times bestseller list, but I think the thing about literature standing the test of time is time. And this was one of those books that you couldn't put it down. It is it's in the category of magic realism, and so it's kind of neat because it hits a lot of things that people are interested in, but culturally it's very accurate, and I think that's really interesting, and I think that is going to help it stand the test of time. It's one of those books that the emotions that are in it and the topics that it touches on are relevant. They are relevant 100 years ago, they're relevant 50 years ago, they're relevant now. I can't imagine them not being relevant in the future, in terms of, relationships and greed and the desire for power, love. There's a lot of those types of things that are touched, as far as, and also, how different communities and different cultures work. I think that was a really interesting part of it. So yeah, if you're looking for a book recommendation, that's a good one. If you don't mind, it's a very big, long book. But I think it will stand the test of time. I think as time passes, it'll get taught in schools, because it's interesting. So those are the questions for right now. Thank you, Megan, for posing such great questions this week. I will be on later to communicate more. Bye.